Okay, so 2 5 10 at chasers.
Yeah, we're eight-handed. For stacks, the cutoff, which is villain one, is 12.25. The button villain two is 11.25, and hero, me, and the small blind, I cover both.
Okay, so hero covers. Okay.
So pre-flop, cutoff opens to 25, which is a little small. Most people are going 30 or 35,
Uh-huh.
but
Yeah, because it's
uh,
because the $10 is on, right?
yeah,
Yep.
$10 is on.
Yep.
Button flats and heroes in the small blind with black aces and raises to 125.
To 125 and playing just over 100 big blinds with the $10 in there. So you go 4x plus the call. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
3x normally, then one out of position and one for the
Yep.
caller.
Yep.
Yeah, and then everyone folds except cutoff and button both call.
So cut off. So they both call. So cutoff
Yeah,
calls, button a double flatter calls. That's a very collapsed range, late
right.
versus late flat at 100 BBs, and then a call of a three bet. And what's interesting about that, and this is again where the general population who doesn't really study poker hasn't caught up, is that they're actually supposed to defend down post flop a lot wider. Like if they were to hit top pair, because it's like the best hand they can ever have in a given spot, but they won't do that, which is somewhat interesting because they're a little bit behind. So looks like the pot's probably just a hair under 400 or 385 or something like that.
Yeah, with rake in the blinds, it's 383.
Okay, I'm just gonna put 380 here. Okay,
Yeah, so flop is king of clubs, seven of diamonds, three of diamonds.
king of clubs, seven of diamonds, three of diamonds. Hero has black aces. Okay,
Yeah, so I bet 200, just over half pot. Then cutoff raises to 700, which I think is pretty great. But then button jams for 1,000 total.
wow. So let's start with your flop bet. So after the 125, everyone's got about 1,000 left. The pot's a hair under 400. You go two. So if one person would call, the pot would be eight. I'm just saying that you probably don't even have to go this large to get a lot of the money. And obviously, you're going to get an action from a king, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of high off suit broadways. I was just saying that if you bet a little bit smaller, you might get action from some other hands. Now, this is really interesting because one of the things that jumps out at me is the propensity for some recreational players here to think that King X of diamonds is the nuts here. Like, I mean, I could see the button doing that, right? King 9 of diamonds, King 10 of diamonds. But then really you'd have to sort of account for both players having a king. On the flip side, there really shouldn't be any two pair here. I mean, are these guys playing King 7 or King 3 suited for a three bet to 125?
No, they both of these guys are loose passive. Especially the initial opener of the cutoff. I honestly don't think he even has 7-7. He's open limping a lot. He definitely has ace king here. I don't think he has any sets though, because king king probably four bets off, but he could have king king. I don't think he has sevens or threes because he's just gonna open limp. But obviously the button has all this like threes and sevens all day.
So this is interesting here because obviously the cutoff is going to get it in. So in reality, like you're calling, I think the cutoff has like 11. You're basically instead of calling 1,000, you have to call like about 1,100 total, right? So it's probably
Right.
like you're probably going to have to call 900 for a pot of what, like 25.
It's
That's a
900 to win 2683.
20 oh to win 26.
Yeah,
So you're
I need
getting
about 24.
so you're getting about 3 to 1 here.
Yeah, it's pretty just a little bit better. I need 24%.
So obviously you're doing very bad against sets, right? I mean, you're
Yeah,
not drawing
I
dead, but you've got 10% equity. It's interesting what the cutoff raises, like with this sizing to here. Man, and then you don't. So here, this is another spot here too, where I think in these scenarios, usually, when you look at it where they're stacked up left, you actually want to have a diamond in your hand to be able to pick up backdoor equity if you're behind, to be able to call across turns. Here, when all the money gets in, I kind of maybe don't want to have the diamond in my hand if I think someone's going to push the nut flush draw here.
yeah,
If that's one of the hands that they might go with.
Yeah, that was my first thought as well. This kind of spot is really I just have never really kind of been in spots like this too often because I just haven't played enough live, and this is pretty rare online. So like I don't know how to do the kind of three-way equities on the fly for this, and kind of thinking through that whole process was kind of foreign to me.
I think it's close. I think it's a lot closer than some people in the live chat think, where they're like snap fold, snap fold. I mean, the fact that get on board with my thinking. If everyone agrees with me that we discount all two pair and we discount pocket kings, then now it's if you were up against a combo draw that had, say, like 50% equity against you, let's say half the time, okay? And then you were up against, say, sets the other half of the time where you had, well, I mean, you've got where you might have like 8 to 10%. To really simple way to look at that would be to sort of average that out, right? And then, 10 and 50 divided by 2 would be 30. You'd need like 30%. But it's not that simple. Like that would be against like one player, right? And if you only need 24%, you'd sort of ship it in. Here, the problem is that I do kind of see one of these guys having King X of diamonds, but unless the button is out to lunch, I don't think he's just jamming like King Queen and just going with it, right? So the button probably is either going to have King X of diamonds or better than one pair. And it kind of brings me to the cutoff. Like, what is the cutoff raising with here 2 to 700? Obviously, they both could have combo draws. That would be a great scenario for you because you'd be holding, some of their outs. But I hate that. I hate the fact that like both of them have to have a king here, which is more unlikely for this to be like a good, you know, obviously you could be up against a combo draw and King X of diamonds, but you want to be up against two flush draws here, which is unlikely, right?
Right. I kind
Just
of felt like
combinations wise.
my first reaction when cutoff raised before button jammed, I was like, this is awesome. I mean, he's probably like I feel like there's a good chance he is overvaluing ace king, which he didn't four bet. And he's just like, oh, I have ace king and king I flop. I'm just gonna go with it. But then like my best case scenario is like he's doing that with ace king, and then the other guy has the nut flush draw, or like king X of diamonds, and then even then like that's like the best case scenario, which is
Yeah.
obviously I'm crushing, but it's kind of tough with so few kings now.
Yeah, I think it's close. I think I probably find a sort of a side fold here, but I think it's probably a lot closer than people think. What ended up happening?
Yeah, so I kind of just thought through it a little bit and was like, I feel like this is just too common for someone to have said here, and I ended up folding.
Uh-huh.
I fold. Cutoff obviously calls. Board runs out. Offsuit king, ace of hearts, and button has king queen of diamonds, which doesn't really tell us anything, I guess.
I knew the button had to
Yeah,
have at least King X of diamonds here. That was the
yeah,
thing. I
yeah. That
mean,
like is like slam dunk in his range. That was not too surprising.
uh-huh.
And then cutoff folds, but he obviously didn't have ace king because that ended up being king ace. So he didn't have ace king because that would have won with a full house.
So cutoff, button has King Queen of diamonds and wins.
Yeah, I just assumed that cutoff must have had the nut flush draw because that's the only other hand that
Not
makes
flush draw or
sense.
some sort of combo draw, like 5-6 of diamonds, probably wants to do some raising to drive somebody else out. Like
Right.
like if I have 5-6 of diamonds here, I want to get Queen Jack of diamonds out of the hand, right behind me.
Yeah. The only reason
So
I discounted that was just the cutoff was so loose, it was so limp happy pre-flop that I don't think he's open raising fives like any of the low suited connectors.
what is he raising the flop though with? He's never just doing it with King X, right?
I guess king X of diamonds. I think
Well, he
I
doesn't
like
have
the
King
first
X of diamonds, right?
right. Yeah, not in this
Right,
luck. I
right.
was thinking like he doesn't four bet ace king. And he's like ace king high flop. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna go with it. Like when he raised, I was immediately like, okay, button folds a lot. I'm just gonna jam and be super happy getting it in here.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting one. I think, you don't want to just be overly result oriented in a given situation. One of the things that I will say lastly here, though, too, that I have brought up on my stuff before, I don't know what kind of dynamic this has, be at Chasers, but there is one thing to note here. If you're playing in a severely capped game, which I define this as a severely capped game if you guys were going to continue to straddle a lot, and the dynamic was there where people were just going to continue to rebuy in, I could see possibly taking slightly the worst of it and gambling it up to get more money on the table. If now you have to have the right dynamics here, where the table has to be good. You have to know that the game is going to, people are just going to continue to put money on the table. I have absolutely made slightly negative EV calls in situations like this, in a dynamic like this, at the 1500 game at Commerce, when I used to cut my teeth there. So that is something that I don't know. I don't know if that was that dynamic here in this hand.
It was pretty close. It was a really good table that night. It was people were sitting pretty deep. I was personally really deep, and then the button who ended up winning sat for a while after, and it was pretty loose.
Right. I mean, in order for you to have to do that, they have to first of all strongly enforce no one going north, which they didn't really do at Commerce, meaning people could sneak on chips and they didn't really say anything. So they have to strongly enforce that. And it's not like a match the stack game like in Texas. But if they strongly enforce the cap and people want to play with the straddle, you want to do stuff to get money on the table. And if you were to take a spot where you figured you might be negative, maybe it was like $100 losing call, like I'm just using round numbers in this particular scenario, could you see how that might be long-term positive EV for the rest of the session?
Oh yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, I know in this spot it's so close that like if I make the wrong decision, it's really like $100 or $200 EV difference, which isn't like that big of a deal. Like it's like 10 or 20 blinds, while having a ton of money on the table could pay like a lot more later on in the session.
Well, there's also image considerations too, which I truly believe in live, where it's not really an image. It's not really looseness or tightness as an image thing. It's more of, are you winning? And if you won this pot and you now all of a sudden have 5,000 in front of you or whatever, it's just going to get, your hourly goes up a ton. I truly believe that. Even though the effective stacks are the same, you will win more in this session. At least I always did. Hold'em is a non-showdown oriented game. People just want to stay away from the guy that's quote unquote running hot. That's a thing in live poker. You can do a lot when you gain a huge stack in a restricted buy-in game. So
that's a good point. I never really considered that before.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I could see calling here if that dynamic was there, but I mean, on paper, I think it's, you're folding, but it's closer than maybe some people think. But I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.